Let me let each of you check in. And then our topic for today is going to be a little mini masterclass on how to open your relationship and problems as therapists that we see that we want to correct before you think about opening. So hopefully we can get that all into like the next 27 minutes. So, Joe, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm on a search for some good beignets here in Ohio. So, and I think
Ooh.
I found three of them. Yeah, I haven't had any beignets since I was in Atlanta.
Oh,
So I want
wow.
some. And I
What?
found two Creole restaurants that I'm going to check out and track down this weekend.
Okay.
I sure
That's
am.
that's a wonderful use of time. That sounds so exciting.
I'm a
All
foodie.
right. And Jessica, how are you doing today?
I'm well. It's Friday. I'm always happy on Friday.
Right?
Friday.
Friday, 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 Friday. Um, with that. So, okay. So, Jessica, we brought you on to Atlanta Sex Therapy specifically to start working with our consensual non-monogamy couples, our ethical non-monogamy couples, our poly couples, and people who want to do relationships in a non-traditional way. And so I was thinking, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, like, oh, I hope this trend goes away. Um, and that's only because it felt like clients were coming to us and like, fix my life. I've broken it. And so
Hmm.
it was just like, oh yeah, yeah, you did break it. With that, and just it felt like that. And so then I kind of really realized just that culture is changing. And I think
Hmm.
we're now in a culture where people own their home average to 5 to 7 years. Whereas in previous generations, especially my parents' generation, you own the home forever. Like that was the
Yeah.
goal to buy a house and to get it paid off, to not have to worry about house payments and retirement. And so my parents are like, why would you move? And whereas the current generation is, oh, it's time to upgrade. Oh, it's time to do something
Yep.
different. Oh, let's move to South America for 6 months. And so we don't want the responsibility of a 30-year mortgage. With that, we're also seeing that people aren't staying on their jobs for 30 years anymore. Whereas when I think about my parents' generation, each of them stayed with the same employer my whole entire life. you know, in that
Yeah.
generation, they believe you don't leave a job leaves you.
Hmm.
With that. And even if it leaves you, you probably should go with it. and so and so that was just kind of that. Whereas our generations, the millennials, the Gen Zs and younger generations are like, if it's a better job out there, it's gonna pay me more.
Hmm.
I'm gonna go, And so they've done things that, now 401k are transferables and you can take them with you and all kind of different things to accommodate that. And so I think now where housing has changed and how employment has changed, we talk about living in a gig economy, which is very much when I want to, when I don't want to, how it fits in my life. People are looking at changing relationships as well and looking for new relationship models, what will fit now. And so I'll actually start with you, Joe. What are you hearing on the phones when people are calling in with non-traditional relationship issues or questions? What do you think you're hearing?
It's kind of like I said last week. Actually, they're going back to wanting to stay in traditional
Okay.
relationships. So they're
Okay.
not wanting to do the poly. They're wanting to work with the one partner and stay with that
Mm,
partner. And
okay.
I don't hear a lot about divorce, which I did mention last week, but I hear
Mm-hmm.
more about them wanting to work through it because they love who they're with. And these are young people.
Oh, good.
And it's a beautiful thing.
Okay.
Beautiful. So I haven't heard much about the poly or
Okay.
being monogamous and the ones that are non-monogamous, non-traditional. It's more they want to go back to the traditional because now they're tired of the non-commitments and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
That's
All
what I've
right. I
heard.
think what I'm seeing in my office and I gotta think all of the clients that I've had that are in I'm just gonna say non-traditional relationships just for a blanket name and term and statement for the purpose of this conversation um is making it work. Like what do we
Mhm.
do with ourselves? How do I get better? I loved it about a couple of weeks ago. One of my clients said, So I keep hearing people say, do the work. I don't think I've done my work. Uh,
I got an F on
and-
paper.
right. And I
Mhm.
was like, well, based on some
Yeah,
things we've talked about today, there's definitely more work to be done. And
yeah,
but that's true for all of us. We can always improve in
that's
some
right.
area with that.
Yeah.
All right. So Jessica, what would
Mhm.
you want? So if a couple's coming in and they're saying, we want to open our relationship. We want to do something different. We want to stay together, but we also want to do something different. What's the top 3 tips you would give them?
I would say the first one is knowing that in an open relationship and wanting to add someone into that, it's not a replacement, it's an extension. So are you looking
Good.
to
Mm.
replace something or extend? The other one would be to first, before you add to someone, know that you are valuable as well. Everyone has something to bring to the table.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And the third would be how was your communication skills? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
a big factor. Even if
Mm-hmm.
you're not in open relationships, you got to know how to communicate. And now that you're bringing someone else into the equation, knowing how to be more efficient in your communication so you are solid or confident within the relationship between you and your other partner and the relationships they're having outside of your primary relationship.
Those are all so good.
Very
Excellent
good.
job. Thank
That's
you.
good.
What came up in that for me was also knowing what your personal relationship insecurities are and
Hmm.
being able to articulate how you'd like your needs to be met and negotiate with your partner on whether they can do that or not. And
Hmm.
so if I have abandonment issues because, and I'm just gonna make something up here because my father left when I was 6. He just said he was going for cigarettes and he never came back with that. And so every time you leave the house, I'm thinking you're not gonna come back. Okay, I know that's my issue. I know that's my insecurity. I've hopefully worked with my therapist on how to manage that anxiety. And so then what's the next step of saying, hey, I have this thing. I'm working on it. But every time you walk out of the house or every time you do a spend the night with somebody else, I always think you're never coming back. This is what I need. Could you give me a phone call at 9 a.m. in the morning before I go to work and say, hey, you miss me, you love me, and tell me what time you're going to be back home? And so if you can do that thing, then I can work on my anxiety at night. And together, now we have a partnership that works with that. Um, and then specifically talking about those very practical things. And I think it always seems to me um, that sometimes people will try to do open relationships and they forget that relationships include people. And so, and people have feelings and people have emotions and people have agendas and people get jealous and people get their feelings hurt. And so it takes a lot of skill to navigate that. At one point in the poly world, they were saying, we don't actually have sex. We just have a lot of conversations about having sex. Or we have a lot of conversations about the relationship with that. Um, and I don't know if that's true as much anymore, but that is needed and required to say, okay, this is what I need for us to do this. This is what I needed for us to do that. With that. All right. As Jessica, what have you seen so far?
Mhm.
Or even read about, heard about, what are you thinking the biggest mistakes are that people do when they're trying to open a relationship?
So I think it's a solution in terms of their sex life. They want to spice things up. So let's just
Mm,
open our relationship. And it's not always about sex. Sometimes it can be financial
mm-hmm,
support. It can be cultural diversity that you want to bring in the picture. Sometimes you want to extend your family. It might be a married couple who has children and you have children and this tribe that you're trying to build. So it's not all
mm-hmm,
about sex, if you
mm-hmm.
will.
No, that's very important. In a conversation this week, we were talking about, I don't know, what's the big deal? If my partner wants to go do something to make them happy, then they should do that. And it's like, yeah, and there may not be a problem with that. The problem usually comes when we start talking about money and time.
Mhm.
I'm expecting you expect spend X amount of time with me. I'm expecting you to spend this holiday with me. I'm expecting your money to only come into this household. I'm expecting that these children will be taken care of in this type of way, and you're going to be this type of parent. And so that's usually where it comes in. And so being able to have like all of those conversations, and all of that. And then some very real topics about um, navigating multiple relationships, and still how do we also then navigate our families in that, and making
Yeah.
sure that's balanced. And so very one of my very first cases um, in with open relationships was a young couple who, that now that they had a baby and the baby was being breastfed, which is an important part, that it threw the whole dynamic off. And so what was happening in that, it was a heterosexual relationship, is because now mom was kind of felt very tethered to the baby. I can't go far. I can't do much. I got to make sure, I'm breastfeeding. And so, and dad was still living like all of his life for all of his relationships. And so the mom started feeling like, okay, but I'm here and I'm stuck at the house all the time. And you're living your best life as, as if we haven't had a child and something doesn't need to change. I've also seen that with elder care. Now I'm at home and I'm taking care of parents, and you partner are living your best life, or I'm helping our kids or something. And so just making sure we're having all of those conversations with all of the things that make up a relationship and a lifestyle with that. This is what I expected to happen with our finances. But
Yes.
now we have this new expense. What does that mean? And how is that? Are we still going to be on track? Because I was trying to retire at 50, and now if we add this dynamic, how does that throw that off? You know,
Yeah.
I had a very real picture of us sitting on a porch in two rocking chairs. What for me? What for you?
That's not working.
At age 65. And so, what are you talking about? Because that messes up my vision and my dream for the future.
I think to
So,
Yeah, and
add to
also,
that, oh, go
oh,
ahead,
go
Joe.
ahead.
Joe.
It, I think it's also having just touched on some of that. It's a lack of maturity to me.
Mm,
Um, because at some point, back to Jessica's point, you have to, and your point also, Natalie, at some point, you have to have a conversation and you have to deal with why you're doing it. The why comes back into it.
mm,
Why are you adding
mm,
more people? And in the first place, if that's why you were kind of starting it, what happens if the other person is doing the same thing as the
mm,
one that you added and trying to,
mm-hmm,
fix that
mm-hmm,
relationship?
mm-hmm,
So does it continue? Does it continue being like,
mm-hmm.
like a King Solomon thing where he has 1,000 wives,
Mhm.
and he goes to each one for,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
1,000 husbands. And, last year there was a couple on the call, and this hasn't happened recently, but the husband was bought into a poly relationship. The wife had the female, but the man didn't want to do it. He said, "I'm
Mm,
happy with you." So that's where a lot of people get stuck. He loved her and he didn't want to do it, but because he loved her, he went ahead and went along with it. What ended up
mm.
happening that the husband ended up falling in love with the one the wife bought in,
Oh.
and the wife fell out. The wife was left out. So it's
Yeah.
like the why, kind
Yeah.
of,
I and I
and what
I
you're
would
going to
want
accomplish. What's the goal?
what's the goal? And
Hmm.
one of the conversations I would want anybody to have is, okay, what if that happened? What if that
Hmm.
happens? What if you fall in love with somebody else? What does that mean? um, what would we do then? What's the expectations around that? Do we have veto rights over anything? With that, and having conversations. When I was first trained in this, and I want to talk about STD, so don't let me forget that. When I was first trained in this, um, and we're talking like 15 years ago, before it was what it is today, but we wanted a couple to be talking and having conversations before they did anything. We wanted them talking and having conversations 2 years before they had done anything, because we wanted them to have talked about it so thoroughly. that they had every scenario mapped out. And so that it was really kind of clear. Um, I don't know if our current culture is willing to talk about something 2 years before they act.
Mhm.
um, the other thing that in my initial training, we wanted a couple talking about it 2 years before there was any action. We also wanted them married at least 10 years
Mm.
before there was any action. And it's funny because I've heard 10 years in church, and then I heard my supervisor say 10 years, that until you've been with the person 10 years, you're really not um kind of bound and into a family with that. And so that it just kind of takes like just 10 years of being together, being, seeing somebody's ups and downs and ins and outs, and kind of just going through for 10 years before you're really just kind of cemented as a family with
Mm.
that. And so Jessica, let me give you the floor because you had something to say.
Mhm. Oh, it was touching on things that you said, and actually Joe as well. A lot of times people they think it's this new little trend. Let's just try it out, but it's really a commitment, and there's feelings involved
Yeah.
as well. So you have to take that into consideration. It's not a new toy. Let's just try it out and see how it
Yeah.
works. There's a lot of things that go into it. So having
Yeah.
that conversation, know that this is something serious
Yeah.
that we're wanting to do, so we need to have a very thorough conversation about this.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
that's
good.
such a good point. Um,
That is good.
and not just thinking about ruptures in a relationship when a couple has tried to open up, but just other ruptures. And like
Mhm.
as a therapist, I've seen couples who have had some type of betrayal, rupture, hurt, injury to the
Mhm.
relationship, and it has taken them years to get over
Mm.
that. Like 10 years, 20 years, it's still coming up in arguments. It's still a pain point from that. And so I'd also like couples just to just be careful. Just kind of be careful as you move forward so that you wind up with the least damage possible with that. The other thing I want to talk about is STDs. STDs are still a thing, people. They're still out
Mhm.
there. I think one
It's
of the
sad.
OBGYNs that when I first started building the practice, I was going out to OBGYNs and I was talking to him and I was saying, what do you want me to help people with? And they were like, you need to educate people on herpes because it's everywhere.
Mm.
And so one of the OBGYNs told me if a person has had more than three sexual partners, they probably have herpes. If they've had less than three sexual partners, but one of their sexual partners has had three more than three
Mm.
sexual partners, then they probably have herpes. Like it is that prevalent. Now, the good thing about herpes is it's a cold sore on your genital area. It's a cold sore. It comes, it goes away. You're fine. Like it's not a lasting damage. You know,
Mhm.
but we're forgetting, I think, about the other ones that are out there, the other STDs that can have more damage and more protection. I mean, well, you really need to protect yourself from. And this is the thing. I just need you guys to keep in mind, your locus of control is
Mhm.
only so big. Okay. And so you may be able to say, hey, I have this new partner, and I and the partner have gotten tested, and I know what partners they're with, but you don't have an agreement with their partners. You just have an agreement with your partner. You can hope in good faith that your partner, let's say partner A, has an agreement with all her partners, which let's call them set B, but you can't control them. Like
Mhm.
that's outside of your locus of control. And so I just want people to remember that. And so if you're deciding to open up, one of the things you also need to decide to do is that we're going to get STD testing consistently, and the whole entire panel with that, like consistently. So depending on how active you are, I'm going to suggest at least every 6 months with that. But if you are a lot more active, then I say every 90 days. Like, let's know. Let's know. and being willing to openly and communicate with that, being willing to ask for results, papers. And I think just keeping in mind, you just can't control outside of your locus of control. And you can have conversations and people can still lie. And so when I was trained 15 years ago, the one of the things that was interesting in my training was that swingers had very low STD rates because they
Yes.
were very conscious about that, and so they operated in kind of a more open and honest way. Um, that has changed. That is no longer the case. And so, and I'm not sure why. I think because it's becoming a more mainstream trend. And so, when people hit mainstream, it kind of goes all kind of ways, which that
Hmm.
is. And so I just want couples to be kind of very vigilant around that and kind of health conscious in that area. And just remembering you'll play at your own risk or
Yeah,
whatnot.
'cause people are
Um,
always honest.
but even with that, you're not, it's also probably the risk of your primary partner as well. So it's not really just kind of play at your own risk anymore with that. Okay, Jessica, last words, final thoughts.
To add to that, and I can wrap up, I learned in my studies that a lot of times, a lot of poly or open relationship couples, once they have their partners, they have something like a closed circle, and they only have sex within that circle because everybody is known to their status. Whether
Mm-hmm.
if you have a STD and you're doing the preventable care and everybody's being safe and cautious when they're having sex, they feel comfortable mentally and physically with the partners that they have. So they don't run into the risk of infecting someone else or bringing something back to the circle.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good thing. Okay.
Hmm. That's
That's really
excellent. I have, yeah, I, yeah,
good. Okay. All right.
all good.
Well, that's our mini masterclass for today
Yes.
with that. And so our my final words is if you're out there, if you're thinking about it, please call us at the 1-800 number that's on the website somewhere, Atlanta Sex Therapy. You'll get Joe, and Joe will put you with Jessica. And Jessica is going to help you through this, help you navigate through all of the things you need to navigate through. So, open, honesty, jealousy,
Mm.
setting boundaries, keeping
Yes.
boundaries, STDs, growing, and all of those. Jessica is here to help you. All right. Well, thank
Yeah.
you, ladies, for your time.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
All right. Y'all have a good day.
Bye.
All right.
You too,
Bye.
and happy birthday to you
Oh, thank you.
early.
All right. All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed our content today. We are here at Atlanta Sex Therapy to serve. If you did like our content, please like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Also, click the little bell so you can get notifications when we put new videos out. People don't know what sex therapists do, and we're trying to get the information out there and spread the word. So I'm going to ask you to send this to 3 people because you never know who may be in need of more good information about sex. Thank you, and just have a wonderful day in life.